Welcome to another episode of Stewart Squared, the podcast myself and my father are starting, where we have fun talking about, well, today is going to be interesting because we're going to talk about San Francisco, and both of us have come to similar conclusions about the nature of the discussion of AI recently, but we might also talk about sort of a federation of devices, a theory that my dad's working on about the federation of devices that will happen with persistent networks. And then we can also talk about Elon Musk as a digital warlord and how the DOJ can't keep up with that. That's kind of related to the San Francisco thing as well. But I think the San Francisco thing is going to be really funny because it's so interesting because it's now, like we've got people make connections to Rome, the United States as being Rome, which kind of is an interesting comparison, in the fall of Rome.
The decline of civilizations. I
Yeah.
know there's an
Yeah.
entire scope there. We may jump the shark and take us too far afield. But
Yeah. Well, but then
I would observe that Elon Musk no longer lives in San Francisco. He's now centered his life in Austin, Texas. So.
Yeah. But San Francisco, in that analogy, what does San Francisco, because New York is Rome, probably, right? Or is DC Rome? What is San Francisco?
No, the United States of America would be Rome, right? Because in Rome there were many cities, and Rome itself was, the headquarters. So that would be Washington, D.C., but it's the United States of America. That's the society that we have. And that's really the thing that people talk about, historians talk about, is that civilizations go through stages, like a life cycle. And, they start to form and be created, and then they prosper and they expand. And then all of the forces lead them to decline. And so the British Empire is an example, the Roman Empire is an example, the Spanish colonial empire, and so on and so forth. You can go back through city history and see that human beings have this tendency to coalesce and then disperse or decline. And so a lot of people think that we're at our peak 10 years ago. We, the United States of America, or American culture, and that we're in a state of decline, and we should accept that. And it's a little bit why Donald Trump is like resonating, because he's going like, make America great again. He's like, go back to our glory days.
Yeah.
Of course, he doesn't really have a higher order thinking. So anyway, that's a topic. But you skipped over a bunch of other stuff.
Well, but
where do we get started?
Let's talk about San Francisco, because San Francisco, it doesn't feel like the people in San Francisco think that they're on the decline. They think that the United States is on the decline, but people in San Francisco now think that they're the only place in the world that matters. Would you agree with that?
Well, there's this guy that's just published this thing about situational awareness and AI. Basically says, well, there are a few hundred people in San Francisco that really know what's going on and know where it's all headed. And he makes the mistake of making a linear forecast from current data. And so he says, well, the delta between Chat GPT 3.5 and Chat GPT 4.0, I think is what it's called now, is 4 years. And in 4 years, it made this kind of leap. So in the next 4 years, it's going to make the same kind of leap. And he says that this is all known and understood within these few hundred people in San Francisco. So it's not even really San Francisco, except that they all live there. Because San Francisco, the Bay Area, is 6 million people, and the city of San Francisco is 850,000. And so he takes this tiny sample and just extrapolates it going forward without any concept of a disruptive event happening along the way that changes the whole thing. So he goes, everybody is trying to buy these NVIDIA chips. Everybody needs as much power as possible to run them. And, this is just going to keep on going. And this is why I like the Numenta guy, whose name I can't remember, but because he starts from a different premise, which is that the next stage in artificial intelligence is truly making it like the human brain. In other words, we don't take a lot of power and we do everything in real time. And this is part of where my constellation of devices comes in, is that, in order to really enable empower human intelligence in an age of AI, you have to have your devices operating at the same speed as we do. And that's a whole other topic.
So you gave some interesting things. So the guy from Numenta, his name's Subutai, and I recorded a episode of that on Crazy Wisdom, probably about 30 or 40 episodes. Again, very interesting. So the thing you mentioned about how 100 people, there's only 100 people who know it. There's
He said a few hundred, by the way.
A few hundred. Yeah. So I think you've seen this before.
If a few is 3, that's 300 people. Yeah.
300 people. My sense is that you've seen this before. My sense that what is going on is that there's a certain amount of marketing going on. And that the marketing always, like, don't you have to pretend to be bigger than you are? And don't most startups kind of do that in order to reach this sort of escape velocity? And then some people start to believe their own marketing or believe their own BS. Would you say that that's an accurate understanding of what's going on?
Well, can you hear the dog barking?
It's muffled. It's not a big deal, but I'll put it in my notes.
It's only distracting me. So there's a difference between a startup and an ecosystem, right? Any one startup operates inside of an ecosystem. And marketing is very important for any one startup. But marketing is not what happens when an ecosystem starts to expand rapidly. And so, I have been through it before, and I've seen multiple, they're usually referred to as bubbles. We're definitely in the AI bubble right now. The only thing you can say about a bubble is that it will end. You can never predict when it will end. And it's an ecosystem thing. It's not like somebody's sitting there conspiring to make it happen. It's like, it's a collective thing. And we are collectively in this mode of, holy crap, AI, wow, it'll kill us. It'll enhance us. It'll, we're trying to figure it out. Even Congress and, politicians are like weighing in because it's like a big deal. And my whole experience learning is that whatever's going on now will change. It's a very broad thing to say, but if we're having this enormous bubble of focus on AI, it will end. I know that. I knew that the bubble in the teens between crypto and Web3 and all that stuff, that ended. It's back again, but that's a different issue. So there was this like expansion and what's the opposite of expansion?
Decentralization.
Yeah. Not necessarily centralization. It's a different idea, but it expands and contracts. That's it. And we're in this expansion thing. And I have the sense that it's kind of gotten to the max, right? The idea that you can just make, trillions more chips, and NVIDIA will just make more chips, and other people will figure out how to make chips like that. And, we'll just build power plants and just power this crap. This is not functional. This is not going to happen. It can't continue like this. So the 300 people in San Francisco all think it will continue, and I think they're going to get a surprise. I can't forecast when that'll happen. I can't forecast how that will happen, but at some point in the future, we'll look back and go, oh, that was a little blip in the space-time continuum. And so, I tried to figure out what it will be. It will be the opposite of what it is, right? So I've been reading this guy's thing, and I can't remember his name, like always.
Leopold Brenner.
Yeah, this guy, Leopold, who's like graduated at the age of 19 and like is super smart, and he looks like he's like 25. So he has no perspective. This is the problem that young people have. And I'm wise and old. You're getting wise.
Getting there.
Getting older.
Yeah. I'm right at the edge.
Getting there.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, so, the only guidance I have is to say, well, what is going on now is not what will be happening in the future. Yeah. And so I think the technology, and this is why I like the Numenta guy, because he basically postulated, and it's Jeff Hawkins, basically, that the only way that AGI happens is if you really can model the brain. that your learning can be in real time, not through massive amounts of power powering these large language models. Because we're also running out of data. And he says, oh, well, we're going to run out of data. He goes like, well, whatever, we'll figure that out. I say that's anyway, that's the sense I have. I can't be more specific about it because I only have this sense. I've seen this before.
Yeah. And I mean, I go back and forth because I'm a user of these things. I know how to use the AI models. I know how to use the LLMs. I've established a sort of connection with them. That's why I call it AI whispers. And I found other people who are also in this ability. And it's so interesting to see the difference between people who know how to use this technology and don't know how to use it. And I have noticed no substantive real change from GPT-4. Like, it gets faster, it does other things. There's been a lot of talk about it. And I mean, what a marketing to say we've got AGI behind the scenes, but you're not ready for it. You're not ready for it.
Yeah.
We have it. You're not ready for it. And then
it's us. We're the problem.
Yeah, interesting. And then you got China, because you alluded to China behind the scenes, and China is like the one thing that they're not incapable. They're very capable people there in China, and they don't really talk about what they're doing.
Particularly when it involves large systems. They redirected the Yangtze River.
Yeah.
They moved millions of people at the drop of a hat. They operate in a world of large systems. So if the problem is just to build larger and larger systems, the Chinese will probably win. They're not very nimble, however, and we have been nimble in the past.
Yeah, interesting.
And maybe still are.
Yeah, in the Western culture, there's something about the Western culture that allows it to be nimble in ways that other people can't reproduce.
Well, not just the Western culture. There's a big difference between Europe and the U.S. This is an American thing. The nimbleness as a society.
Okay. So
we can get into change and everything. Oh, that's a whole other thing. I want to talk about the constellation of devices and how everything.
Okay.
So, the basic point of view I have is AI is not real time. It's batch. It's huge batch systems. They feed all the data they can find. They even make it up into these large language models. And 6 months later, they come out with something that, sounds smarter. I just don't think that's the way the world works, and never has. It's all pointing towards becoming a truly real-time system. I can't see beyond real-time, but I can see real-time in everything. And that's the thing that I'm most interested in right now. And and I can talk about a lot of different pieces of this. We want to switch topics?
No, let's go.
I'll kick it off.
Yep, go for it.
So I've been looking at all these devices. Have you heard of the Brilliant AI frame?
No.
Go to brilliant.xyz. It's a group of hackers, and they're in Europe, ironically.
Ooh, nice.
And that have designed a glass frame called the Brilliant AI frame, and it's a hackable thing. Right? All the components can be taken off. You can reassemble it. The code is open source, and so they've basically modeled pretty close to what Meta has now, and with the Ray-Ban Wayfarer, and pretty close. I mean, they're obviously having problems shipping it because I ordered one, and I just got the reason I'm thinking about it is I just got a notice saying it's wait until August. It's like we found a power problem, and but they're hackers, so they don't really care about doing it the right way, so to speak. But it's a really interesting approach to the whole thing. And I watched a video. Did I share this video with you? It's on the Verve. I'll share it with you. Where this lady talks about the history of glasses. It goes all the way back to the very first time somebody put a piece of glass in front of their eye and said, wow, this is interesting, to what the future is. And I think she nails it. And that there is a future for AI glasses, or glasses with AI that also give you a real-time view on the world. And so all the elements are there, but somebody has to figure out how to put it all together. But I go beyond that, and I go, if you require a pair of glasses to be just as good as an iPhone or a smartphone, it'll never work. Right? It has to cooperate with something else, much like the Apple Watch cooperates with the iPhone in the Apple ecosystem. And so what I do believe that each device has to have access to the internet in real time. And so then you start to think about what's required to do that. Right now, the iPhone goes offline on a regular basis if you live somewhere where there's no poor cell coverage, right? Because once you're out of Wi-Fi, you depend on cell, and cell is not a reliable thing. So how do you get to the point where you have always real-time access to the internet? And I mentioned to you earlier, but I just got an email yesterday from Starlink saying they have this new terminal. They call them terminals, but it's a thing that communicates with the satellites and gives you real-time access anywhere that fits in your backpack. Starlink, I can't remember what they call it, but they and that's really interesting because now it fits in your backpack. And the original terminal was like this big, right? And then they have a thing called Flat Mobile, which we just bought and we're going to install on Valor's overnight horse trailer. That works while you're driving, right? And wherever you go. Yeah, so in your vehicle, they've designed it for boats and other mobile applications, but wherever you go, right? Because the satellites are up there all the time, everywhere. And they have something like 7,000 satellites in the air. Maybe it's 6,500, but they have a lot of satellites up there, and they're using Starship now they will use Starship to put up, 1,000 at a time. And so Starlink, Elon Musk has got this worked out. You have a persistent network of satellites that are always available that give you coverage everywhere in the world. Well, that's it right there. That's the solution to the problem. So they've got it into a thing that fits in your backpack. Well, this is really interesting. There's a parallel development going on. And this is my next newsletter. I'm trying to figure out how to pack everything in, so I might have to break it down. But because the Starlink backpack terminal is pretty amazing in and of itself. Apple made an announcement at their most recent Worldwide Developers Conference that everybody missed. No, there's been no coverage of it. And that's that if your iPhone has no connection at all, it goes into what's called SOS mode. Yeah. And it's called SOS mode because the first instance of it was you could be off on a mountain somewhere and fall down. Yeah. And your iPhone can still communicate with the satellite and will send a broadcast out to get somebody to come help you. And that's why it's called SOS. The announcement, very small announcement, they said, well, now you can send an iMessage in SOS mode. You can send a text, but their texts are rich texts. So you could send a photo, of your broken bone and, send it to somebody specific and, get somebody to come help you even more. That's a technology inside of Apple where it's inside the iPhone. This is like they can communicate with the satellite network, and they have a different satellite network than Starlink. It's called Globalstar, and they have a deal with Globalstar, and so they can do real-time communications from the existing hardware and operating system inside the iPhone. And this is I think there's a strategic plan at Apple to eventually allow you to make phone calls. You won't even need your carrier, Verizon or AT&T in the US or whatever it is in Argentina, and or anywhere else. They can replace the entire cellular infrastructure just with a connection to the satellites. Well, if they can do it inside the iPhone, there's a lot of stuff packed into this thing. Maybe you can take that little thing and fit it in your Oura Ring. Maybe you can fit it in your Apple Watch. Maybe every device can have independent, real-time, high-speed access to the internet. Maybe it's a whole different future that we have. No longer have the cellular carriers in between you and data, because cellular carriers are, well known to be slow. And that's the Brilliant Labs. And I want to kind of weird. You always have to look in these diagrams. You always have to look, where is the the thing, the intelligence. And this thing,
Is
I
it
guess it's in
PCBA?
the PCBA.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because there's a little board there, and that's probably where the memory and the processor is. And
So for our listeners who don't see the shared screen, we're going on brilliantlabs.xyz, and they have this awesome diagram of these glasses that my dad had mentioned, and they're so small, and like but small is no longer a problem. So PCBA that's probably where it is. It's
yeah,
a circuit board,
the circuit board, yeah,
a printed circuit board,
PCBA. I don't know
printed
what's the
circuit
acronym stand for, is what you know. But
printed circuit board.
what is PCBA? Printed circuit board. But what's the A?
Yeah.
Printed wiring board. Yeah, just
Assembly.
acronym PCBA. Yeah, there it is, assembly. So it's the thing. You put all the chips and stuff together. This is a bit of a side trip, but everybody refers to the NVIDIA chips. But when you see CEO Wang, however you pronounce his name, stand up on stage, he's holding these boards with all these chips on them. So they're not chips, they're boards with chips on them. It's like the terminology they refer to as chips. And I guess there's some kind of hardware interface that you can just plug them into racks and assemble them, and they all work together. That's a very detailed thing, but NVIDIA has corrupted the term chip, because chip used to be a little thing that you pack all these circuits on. And they're talking about whole boards.
Wait, that seems like in terms of the history and how it connects to today. So my understanding of the NVIDIA is that they're a graphics company.
GPUs, graphics processing units. Yeah, they started with video games. And what GPUs do is they communicate directly to the screen, right?
Yeah.
And the original thing is you would build a computer with GPUs in it, and all of the graphics would go through that single processor, put them on screen, so that when you're playing a video game, you get real time. Because video games are an amazing technology to study independent of whether you play them. But, I just heard the most recent version of Call of Duty simulates reality so much that it actually can be used as training for soldiers, for white warfighters.
Yeah.
And this is all about the Uvalde shooting. But the guy was using Call of Duty, whatever the most recent version is, to learn how to shoot. And so he had never actually fired his rifle. And he went into the Uvalde school and started shooting people based on the training that he had in Call of Duty. So one of the suits in that school shooting was against the Activision, which makes Call of Duty. And so that's a really interesting little tidbit there. That's what GPUs enable, is the ability to do really fast graphics on screen. That's why it's called a graphics processing unit. Well, the function that GPUs do for building LLMs is the same basic thing. I think it's called pipeline.
With words,
pipeline
or tokens.
Yeah, with words instead of pixels. Yeah. And understanding the fundamentals of technology is really helpful to figuring out what the hell's going on. So I keep wondering. So they're using GPUs to do LLMs. Does that mean that the people who build video games or get machines that are good at video games can't get GPUs anymore? So supply all going to LLMs. And is it having an effect in the video game business, since that's where NVIDIA started? Anyway.
Well, and they had a foray into crypto as well. That was I watched this amazing kind of thing on NVIDIA where it showed them compared to Intel and their market cap versus Intel, and then really once the crypto started to go off, that's when the thing switched basically. But this is what I love about the point, which is the point of what we're talking about is just that NVIDIA is the pets.com. Well, potentially the pets.com of.
No, it's much more real than pets.com. It's hard to make that equate. But the thing is, their valuations, their revenue and they're very profitable, of course,
Wait, can we
because
go into this? Yeah,
revenue is
revenue.
growing so fast. But
Yeah.
their revenue is like a tenth of what Apple's is, and yet their valuation is the same, 3 trillion. And so you sit there and you go, well, how do you justify, just because the economics eventually mean something? How do you justify buying NVIDIA stock when it's worth 10x what Apple is? No, it's worth same as Apple with a tenth of the revenue.
Yeah.
Like, how much do they have to grow to justify long term what their valuation is? So it's a total bubble stock in terms of the value. As people get enthusiastic about this stuff, and they forget to think about the reality.
And well, this is the craziest thing, because it feels like such a good question for you, because you've seen it so many times. I've seen it from a distance so many times, but now this is the first one where I actually have like inside knowledge of what goes on, and it's there is a bubble, but it doesn't mean the whole thing is a bubble. There is a fundamental change that's happened. Part of that is going to blow up, and what I believe you're saying is that you can't identify what part or when. But we can talk about
or how. Yeah, that's the how. So, right now, I mean, you just look at the AI companies, independent of NVIDIA. They're valued at these shocking valuations. I mean, OpenAI, it's worth. I'm trying to remember what is valued at now, but I think the last valuation is like 80 billion or something like that. Now I have 3.5 billion in revenue, so there is some connection between value of the stock and the revenue. But if you're buying them at 80 billion, you have to believe that they will eventually be worth like $1 trillion. And is that company good enough? And it might be, but is that company good enough to sustain that kind of increase in value over time? But that's OpenAI. They're number one, right? They're backed by Microsoft. They're doing business with Apple. They're in the middle of the whole thing.
Just hired the NSA.
But you take the other one, right? Anthropic and all these others. You go. Usually there's number one, number two, and number three. This is the pattern, right? So there's number one, number two, and number three. And so you go, okay, OpenAI is number one. Who's number two? And who's number three?
Perplexity.
And after that. So you can't get around the fundamentals, right?
So this goes back to the question I have. So, and before I forget it, there's so Apple versus Microsoft, 1980s, 1990s. Apple said, you know what, you guys are nuts. Bill Gates is just doing things to kind of rope customers in. He's a really good business person, but he doesn't understand technology. And Steve Jobs says, nope, hardware, software need to be together. Now we're in that same sort of divergence, but Steve Jobs is no longer the head of Apple. And so we've got a sort of situation where you've got this Evernet, but like the soul of Steve Jobs still in Apple? Is his kind of thinking still kind of leading to this federated of devices where all the software, you mentioned these XYZ guys, that immediately was like, okay, that's the like sort of open source version of whatever Microsoft was doing. Let's hack it all together. Let's do it everything together. But then there's Apple sitting there quietly doing its own thing. Are they going to be able to keep the legacy of Steve Jobs alive and get?
Well, they certainly have.
Yeah,
you can't say are they not. I mean, Steve Jobs died in 2014, something like that, 10 years ago. So how long do you go before you decide that they're not doing it?
Yeah.
I think I have an answer to that question, though. I think the Vision Pro was a Steve Jobs would never have introduced the Vision Pro the way it is.
Yeah.
It's actually the lesson he learned from Next. He went off with Next and raised some money and built a thing that was way over spec. It was too big and too powerful, and it didn't, so you look at Vision Pro and you go like, that's Apple's Next. And now they're backing off from it pretty quick, right?
Wow.
They're not, the reporting this week is that they won't build the next version of the Vision Pro. They'll do something cheaper. But if that's the starting point, you have to say, so what is the vision? And actually, right now you can compare it, because even though Meta is building the Quest and is on Quest 3 as a VR thing, they have the Meta glasses, the Ray-Ban glasses. And most people say, I got to send you this link. This lady did a forecast on the future of AI glasses, but um, you can see how Meta can take what they've done with the Ray-Ban glasses in the first instance, the second instance, and you can start to map out where they go with it. And they'll get there probably before Brilliant does, but Brilliant's the open source version. So, there's a race to put everything into glasses to make them a functional and useful device, to the degree that even if you don't wear glasses, you might want to buy one and put them on because of the value that it has. Apple's not a participant in that conversation. They're not showing products that show that evolution, even though Tim Cook has repeatedly stood up and said he's much more interested in AR than VR. And yet they introduced this thing that was a bastard of AR and VR. You can kind of see through them, but they make you look weird and they're heavy and uncomfortable and blah, blah, blah. Not to mention $3,500 a pop. So if Apple's lost its way, as with the reference point of what Steve Jobs figured out and learned, the Vision Pro is the first instance of that. And yet they are so powerful and have so many devices and they make so much money. And then remember, they've developed their own chips. They developed their chips, the operating system, the applications, the whole stack. They deliver everything to their intended consumer, who might or might not want to use anything else, including apps from other people. That's the fundamental proposition they do. That actually, in that sense, Apple is still an incredibly powerful position, and it's hard to imagine. I mean, they can blow it with the Vision Pro, and it has no effect on their operating results. It's like, a few billion here and there.
It's just so crazy.
They're actually doing pretty good with Apple TV, and that's a whole nother piece of the puzzle.
The scale is just so interesting, because this interesting thing about business that I've learned is that the getting to the scale, and then once you have the scale, it just completely changes the whole dynamics of business. That, like, if you're just doing 100K contracts, that's like nothing, or $1 million contracts, that's like nothing. Like, they
do a product that has to be in the billions.
Interesting.
And their revenue is like 190 billion or something like that. A new product has to scale to 20 in order to affect the results of their business. That's why the Vision Pro is like, it's whatever. It's a little bump in the road.
It was like the next. That's a good article that you could write. So I had a great conversation on Friday with a guy doing rockets that it was an interesting business model, but we started talking about the R1 and how AI is going to affect the space stuff. And the Rabbit R1 is this device that he showed me on while we were recording, and it had a video, or it had a ability to take cameras, and you could talk to it like a device. And his theory was that it's just you're gonna have a button on your phone. Apple's gonna put on a button on your phone, and you're just gonna start. That's gonna be the AI thing. Like maybe like, and that makes more sense.
There's no button. There'll be no button.
It'll just be always
on.
They
just announced this at the Worldwide Developers Conference. AI is going to be built into everything. So you talk to your phone, hey Siri, Siri then is going to be intelligent at a level it never was before. And Apple's been working on AI. People discount what they don't know about. Apple's been working on AI the whole time. Right? They have their own LLMs. They have people that are just as smart. In fact, this guy that did the situational awareness thing, one of his partners is it's the other guy. Anyway, Apple AI people are leaving Apple and joining these startups. And so Apple's had core research going on, but they don't tell everybody what they're doing. This is the difference about Apple. They keep it a secret intentionally and aggressively. They keep everything a secret until they're ready. So they announced at the Worldwide Developers Conference that they have LLMs that'll fit on an iPhone. Right, it's a huge device here that has a lot of resources on it. Small LLMs that will be dedicated to helping you do things. And my test is always time zones. And can your device figure out where you're going to be at the time that you're making an appointment, to know which time zone you'll be in and how different it is from the people that you're making appointments with? It's like, that's such a brain dead process right now, and has been forever. No one's ever solved that problem. So that's my test. If an AI can figure out time zones, which should be pretty easy to do for an AI, an agent. So that's the thing they're doing, is they're going to make modern life much easier to live using AI on the iPhone. That was the fundamental message that they were putting out. And everybody's all wired up about how big their LLMs are and all this stuff.
Yeah,
But that's the point. They're sitting there thinking about what really helps customers. And that's the ethic that Jobs really embedded in the company before he passed. And Tim Cook encourages that. And that's part of the thing. You still have to make these product decisions. So it's very hard to tell if Apple knew when it introduced the Vision Pro that it would never sell as many as people thought it would. Did it actually sell all 450,000 that it built? Or does it still have an inventory, or is there still 100,000 of those things in distribution? So they don't need to make any more, right? I mean, how do they know how big the thing will be before they introduce it?
How do they make those decisions? How do they maintain their secrecy even though they're a public company?
Because public companies only have to give you the financial results.
Okay. Yeah.
They don't have to disclose what their product strategy is, or any of that stuff. It's just public is, you want to share in the company. What do you need to know? Well, you need to know how much revenue they have and how much money they made, what their growth rate is, and, financial metrics.
Interesting.
Apple's very disciplined in that, and it's funny that no one else has figured that out. I'm trying to think of another company that doesn't feel like it needs to talk about anything except its financials.
ASML, maybe. ASML.
Could be. I don't know much about them, but
yeah.
I mean, I know who they are, but.
So we got like 5-10 minutes left. I want to ask you sort of it could be related to everything we've talked about as well, but there's something I just have a personal interest in, which is fiduciary duty. Fiduciary, like how, as an investor and as an entrepreneur at various times, how do you think about fiduciary duty? It's something that
you want me to explain fiduciary responsibility in less than 5 minutes? Okay. So it's a concept, and that's why it's so hard to nail down. It's a concept, and that is only enforced or applied by exception. In other words, when you are not doing your fiduciary duty. So different classes of people have different levels of fiduciary duty. The big thing that happened was that Congress made the CEO and the CFO legally responsible for their fiduciary responsibility. So they could be put in jail if they didn't do it. And there's a lot of interpretation in that. But at different levels, everybody that's related to them has, some fiduciary responsibility. So as a shareholder in a company, and I represent our firm, we have a fiduciary responsibility, but we also have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors.
Yeah.
So we sit in between these two sets of fiduciary duties. And, there's constant debate about which one trumps the other. Our alarm is up.
Oh no.
Our alarm is going off.
I don't hear it. So do you have to go?
Making a lot of noise.
I don't hear it at all.
Yeah, I think I have to stop and go find out what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was fun. Good.
Okay.
Good. Another episode.
Hold that one, and we'll take it up again.
Cool. Talk to you soon.
I'm gonna go check out why our alarm is going off.